down the center of the frog, and the best way for me to do that is I have this nice little jig here. I can put the frog in, tighten it down. Make sure that's
now, is that
equal on
something
both sides.
you made?
I had this made 30 some years ago. So then I'm going to use my little Vigor drill press here. And this thing works amazingly well. The only problem with it is the slow speed is 10,000 RPMs. So it wasn't made for drilling holes in wood. And I'm going to drill right straight through to the mortise.
How do you know you've gone through the mortise?
And you can just feel it pop through. Just like that. Done. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this and set it
Dennis
down.
says that John Alberti makes and sells a very good jig for this. I had no idea he made jigs for
Yep,
that.
he's got all kinds of jigs. So, where's my silver scrap? Okay. All right, so we've got that done. All right. Right in the center, just the way we want it. So next I'm going to take my bow drill. And this next step is absolutely super important. And that is you want to remove the silver away from the hole, countersinking this, so that when you put the eyelet in, the eyelet will grab the underslide and will actually lift it up. So we want to avoid that. So we're just going to take this countersink here and go ahead and open this up. There we go. That's plenty good enough. Oops, done with that.
Jack said he'd been using his foray to drill the hole in the frog, but he sees this, he thinks it's faster and safer.
Well, if you do it all the time with your foray, and if you have a drill bit that's actually the widest point is at the very edge, and again, this drill bit size is a number 36 drill bit. You can kind of steer it a little bit and make sure that it's going straight in the frog. Just, check it with a pin. But this is a pretty surefire way of doing that. Okay, so I have the hole is ready. So now we're going to make sure the eyelet will run up and down the mortise without catching on anything. So it's just barely bottoming out, so I'm going to go ahead and just take my chisel and just going to scrape it with the chisel.
So you're using that with the bevel down when you're scraping it?
The bevel is down. Well, there we go. Still a little bit snug. And you can see it's gonna shine up that wood where the eyelet's dragging. Again, I don't want to make the bottom of the mortise here any deeper than I need to. So I can move it back and forth, wiggle it a little bit. It's a little bit tight right at the very end there.
Can you, if it's shiny, can you try and show us?
It's all done now.
Oh.
It's not going to be there. Okay, so now it's time to put the eyelet and the frog. So I use my parallel jaw pliers. These work really well for this. And they don't tend not to leave any marks like a pair of vice grips might. So remember before when we cleaned up the eyelet, we made these two nicks so that this is self-tapping. So once we get this started in a few turns, I'm going to check and make sure that it's going straight up and down this way and this way. So looks pretty good. I think that's another jig that Alberti makes, is an eyelet, a jig for actually screwing the eyelet in. Okay. Okay. There we go. Well, it's officially a bow. It's not a very good one yet, but it's a bow. So now our next step is we want to center the butt of the stick around the eyelet. So in order to do that, we've got to reduce these 3 bottom facets, and we want to do that in a way that keeps it centered around the hole. So my nipple, the size I use is 6 millimeters. It's a little bigger than some people use. And the butt of the stick is 8.5. So 8.5 minus 6 millimeters is 2.5. Divide the 2.5, so you get 1.25. Add it back to your 6, so you get to 7.25. So when you measure from the edge of the nipple to the edge of the facet, you want that to be 7.25. So right now we're at 7.6, so we've got plenty of room to adjust here. So now that I've got this fit, I'm still good here with my alignment. I only adjust one facet at a time. That way, if I just went ahead and knocked down a couple of strokes off of each facet, then I might be changing my orientation. You really, really, really want to make sure that this fits perfectly at this point. This is, when we're done fitting the stick, that's a finished surface, and we want to make sure that it's good. So I'm going to go ahead and take off a few strokes off of the bottom here.
Is it it better to use your 9.5 for the bottom facet, or?
Yeah, the problem with using a small plane is that you end up, you kind of dive into the mortise here a little bit. So I like to have a plane that bridges both beginning and over the top of the mortise. Just easier. Okay, so we're staying straight there. So now I'm gonna check and see what I'm, 7.75, 7.75, that's amazing. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm keeping my fit here, it's looking good. Still looks great. Let's see how we did on the sides here. 7.6, 7.6. Okay. So we'll check my alignment with my head again. It's one of these things you check, and cut, and check, and check, and check, and cut. So you make sure that you're absolutely perfect fit here. Okay. Down. I'm going to use my glasses. Looks good. I'm starting to hit the bottom with my eyelet, so I'm going to turn that 1/2 turn. Make sure that it's perfectly aligned here. Okay, we'll take off 3 here. Check. Still good. Still good. Fits nicely. Seven five, so we've got 1/4 of a millimeter to go. Still everything's lined up well. And you notice I'm planing it out on this little block right there. That's because my bow is bending down. So if I was doing it up here, I'd either have to do it at the end of my bench or try to squash this down, and that doesn't work so well. So working off of this block works really well. Okay, I need to go a little bit more out here. Okay, that looks the same. And make sure I'm okay. Good, good. Two. Check it again. Still good. Okay. Still good. Okay, I am less than 1/10 of a millimeter from my finished dimension here, so I'm just going to take one cut. See what I get. 1/10. One more cut. Still looks good. I think I got a little bit of a burr. This is one thing I do is I'll take my scribe here and I'll burnish that a little bit so I don't have a sharp edge it's digging into the bow. My eyelet is dragging again. Okay, that's good. All right, I'm going to check and see how this is sitting. So sometimes the alignment of your frog and the hole aren't quite exactly right, and it will lift a corner. The frog will sit off to the side, either the front or the back, and this is the time you absolutely have to correct that. So you may have to cut more material off of one side or the other to get to that. It's a little frustrating, but it's the only way you can do it is to fix it right now. Okay. Take one swipe off of here. That's good. So I am measuring on both of these corner facets that the frog sits on. I don't care what that measurement is. I only care that it's equal. The width of your bottom facet and your angles of your of the underslide are going to dictate what they're going to be. You may have a wide bottom facet or a narrow bottom facet, so there's no way that there will be this measurement and the corner facets will be the same. So we're only making these two equal. So I'm at 7.46, 7.48. That's pretty darn close. I can take one more cut here. Okay. All right, and we are, I'm going to take just, I've got so little, this doesn't really matter that much, but I'm just going to go ahead and take a file and just take one swipe with each one, on each one. Okay. Okay, so that is fit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some shellac on these facets because some of this wood, my hands are always moist. That's one of the reasons I'm so purple all the time. Some woods, the pores get dark really easily and it just looks unattractive, I guess. So I'll go ahead and I'll just put a thin coat of shellac on those right now. You can see how gorgeous this bow is going to be. The color's fantastic, and it hasn't even been in the sun yet. So we're going to give that a minute here to dry up a bit. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I've got the frog fit, is now I'm going to reduce the width of the frog, of the stick. And again, I want to make sure that this center facet is going absolutely parallel with the length of the bow. I don't want it going off to the side, because what you'll end up with is you'll end up, if you look at the end of the frog, you'll see one of these the one side of the underslide will be higher than the other. It's just not aesthetically very good looking. So, okay, that's good enough for now. And check with our square here. I don't think that the old makers use their square too much on the butt of the stick. I think they just eyeballed it mostly, but again, I think it's really important. All this alignment stuff is important to make this eyelet and screw frog combination work as well as possible and work for a really long time. Okay, and so this measurement is going to be also that 7.25.
Brett Spillers asked, are you ever nervous working on master bows?
Ever nervous? It's funny because sometimes I feel like, man, how do I do this? So, yeah, I'm not necessarily nervous, but you just can't make, when you get down to this point, you just can't make very many mistakes and have, you know, a really high quality bow.
I think he might have been talking about repair work.
Oh, repair work. You know, I've been at this for so long that I told people, you know, I could work on your, you know, $250,000 tour in front of you and be absolutely at ease doing that. But the thing that makes me nervous is writing up the bill in front of you. Because I'm going to spell your name wrong and a lot of other things wrong. So I'm quite dyslexic, so that's the only nervous part for me.
Do you feel like your dyslexia gives you an advantage in any of the work that you do?
There's a really interesting book that's worth reading. It's called Dyslexic Advantage. And it's written by these two doctors out in, I think, the Seattle area. And they have done a study that shows that a lot of dyslexics end up being engineers, doctors, inventors. There's a guy named Dean Kanan, I think his name is. He's the guy that invented the Segway. He's also invented some other amazing things, like a home dialysis machine that's this big instead of some gigantic thing that they used to have. He's so dyslexic he can't read a book. And so, yeah, it's I think sometimes it's an advantage.
That book is available to listen to as an audio book through your local library app on your phone. So if you have Overdrive or any of those other ones, you can download it for free and listen to it for, I think the maximum is 3 weeks at a time.
So you can see I'm planing farther down the stick here, trying to keep this face in one plane. It's a really easy thing as you extend your arm to rotate your plane away from you, and so you've kind of try to fight that natural thing. So. The French bow makers that was probably the biggest plane they used at this point. So a lot of times you look at old bows, you can kind of see, a little bit of ripples in the planing and whatnot. Check and see how we're doing here. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Still staying square. Okay, getting close here. Still really thick down here, so this bow, the biggest piece is going to be here, so I can trim anything down here to below 8.5.
Ed Shillitoe asked, do you measure the diameter of the stick at several points or just at the ends?
So my master plan is I want my camber to match my template while I'm making it. And so I'm going to use that as my guiding force, I guess, in how the thicknesses are going to work. So later on, maybe today, we'll get around to putting the bow under tension and seeing how the curve comes out of the bow. And while I have sort of about measurements I'll use along the stick, I won't really know until I get onto that. But with this tort style bow, 8.5 is the smallest spot. About the middle of the hair length is 8 millimeters, so we drop down to only by 0.5 millimeter, and then the second half, or this quarter spot, is going to be 7 millimeters, and then 2.5 behind the head. So that's the 5.5 behind the head. So that's the general plan: 8.5, 8, 7, 5.5. And most importantly, you want whatever this measurement is, you want this to be the same all the way down the stick until you get to about here. And then the sides get a little bit narrower till you get to the head, and that's going to be 5 is the thickness or the width of the bow, and 5.5 is the height of the bow. So that's a general plan for this bow. So let's see where we are here. So 8.7. So more to take off. Okay, so that was good there. Now we can go ahead and finish this up.
So you're still measuring off of that nipple
Still measuring off the nipple.
to the 7.25 measurement?
7.25, and I'm making sure that I've got this area is dead flat on both sides. plane is cooperating with me, leaving these sides still square. Super close. Probably one more swipe on both sides, and we'll call the game here. Okay, still square. Okay, 8-5 and 8-5. Okay, so these two are now finished surfaces. So let's go ahead and we'll throw a little shellac on this too.
What kind of shellac are you using?
So this is blonde de-waxed shellac. So it's been, I guess they bleach it somehow. And the wax has been removed. It comes in flakes. I just bought this one the last time. I just bought it on Amazon, but you can also get it from Kramer. And the thing about it is, if you use a regular orange shellac, which looks absolutely gorgeous on the stick, if you have a difference in the thickness of it, you'll end up with color changes. And it's very noticeable right here where the head starts to curve into the center ridge. You'll see this light patch here, and whatever is on the head, on the tip plate, you'll have to remove that all the time because it'll be orange, of course. So this is just a little bit less of a fuss. I know that a lot of the bow makers in Germany, maybe some in France, they have other gums that they put in with their shellac, things that would be alcohol soluble, like maybe Sanderac. But this is super simple, just a straight up French polish. Okay, so I've got my sides here taken down to their finished width. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the sides of my frog so that they're the same width as the stick. So I have a dummy screw here. I'm going to put the stick together. I'm going to take my plane and I'm going to plane the sides of the frog. So I'm actually planing the silver. And I'm going to have to back off that blade a little bit. You can use a file, of course, to do this too. Oops. Okay, got that down a bit. On the other side. You can see I'm getting down really close. You see there's just this little feathery edge here. It's still hanging on. Okay, so I am down absolutely flush with that side. Let's do the other side. Okay. Okay, clean this up. I'm going to do one more thing with this before I'm done. So I actually twist the frog ever so slightly off of alignment. I'm going to take one more swipe on this, and I'll make the underslide ever so slightly narrower than the stick. And that way the you can just barely feel that edge now.
What would the purpose of doing that be?
Because if it's exactly the same size, it never fails. As soon as you finish the frog, you get everything put together, and the frog with tension on it lifts up a little bit. You might feel just a little bit of the side of that frog. So you can't. I mean, if you measured it, it'd be a tenth or two at the very most. So anyway, so we've got that fit now. And so remember now, from here on out, that these are all finished surfaces, so we don't want them. We want to be careful not to ding up the silver or anything. Okay. Take this off. Okay, I'll set that aside for now. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and plane the top down and get that down to the finished height. So again, we want to try to keep this face parallel with the bottom. Don't want to twist it as we plane it here. So keep an eye on that. And I'm using considerable downward pressure to try to keep this from, well, so it'll cut, but just keep absolute control of everything. Now, still checking our thicknesses here, so we're still way oversized. 8.8, so we're getting close to the height here. Plane out here a little more. 8.7. 8.6. Move that out of the way here. Still 8.6. Just a little bit more. Alrighty, we got it. So that button is right dead center in the middle of the stick, or the stick's in the middle of the button, however, whichever way you want to look at it. So that's pretty nice. So the collar sticks up ever so slightly. Doesn't come quite to the corners, but it does come over the edges a little bit. So that's sort of aesthetically about a decent balance there. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little shellac on this surface now. Keep my dirty hands off it. Okay. So still thick here, quite a bit. So I'm going to try to take a little bit off of the bottom here. Trying to get this squared up.
Does where you remove wood from affect the camber of the bow as you're making it?
It will, for sure. And if you take a lot of material off of one side only, it may change, it may relax the camber, and in some cases actually you can see it gain camber, which seems really odd, but it'll do it. So clean a little more up here. Clamp this so that the head's off the end of the bench. Okay, so I got mostly clean surfaces here on the top and on the bottom. But I'm oversized, but not oversized by more than a millimeter anywhere. Still pretty chunky here. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to absolutely refine this camber so it absolutely matches my template. So we'll check and see how we're doing here. It fits a little too much there maybe. So we need to add a little bit up here by the head. Add it right here. So this is something that here we have to pay attention to, is that this is getting close to the finished product, so we have to make sure that we get the camber, the bow stays straight, and the head doesn't twist. So the head has to stay in alignment with the head. So we've got like 3 things that we're doing at once. So let's put that on there. And get the torch out here, the alcohol lamp.
Antonio said, magnificent, beautiful work.
Thank you. Yeah, remember to hit that like button if you haven't already. One of the YouTube channels I watch is, I think it's called Ingalls Coach Works. So it's a guy named Dave Ingalls. He lives out in Joliet, Montana, and he builds and restores old buggies and wagons. And it might sound like a silly thing, but for a bowmaker to want to watch, but my very first job out of high school, I worked for a local museum, and I was working on restoring an old buggy that they had. I was helping out with that. So that's kind of my part of my background is we had 150 horses when I was a kid, and I'm all done scooping up horse poop, so I'm not ready to go back and do that anymore, but I sure still love the old buggies and wagons. But anyways, this guy, he is an amazing woodworker and blacksmith, and last year he made a complete copy of the 20 mule team borax wagons for out in Death Valley, and he made them from absolutely from scratch. It was absolutely amazing project. So you can go and watch him do that. I think the wheels were 7 feet tall, something like that, weighed over 1,000 pounds. So really neat project.
Why would you ever need a wagon that big?
Well, it was basically like a railroad car sized thing that was drawn by a horse, or by mules actually. It was quite amazing. And that same borax would be what we used for flux to solder our ferrule and our rings together. They used an engine hoist to lift the hubs up onto the lathe. The hubs were, I think the blanks were like 300 pounds apiece. Amazing. Okay, that fits really well. Yeah, just a tiny bit too much down here at the back, but we'll leave it for now. And it's nice and straight. Now it's funny when you look at it from a different direction and it's not as straight, so. Good alignment. Let's check with the straight edge here. So I got a spot right here. This is where I just heated it actually.
Tell them about some of the other projects that you've done when you lived at the camp.
My first shop class I took was 7th grade, and it was an 8-week course, I guess, and my project was making a DN ice boat. So it's a sailboat that goes on the ice, and it goes top speeds around 55 miles an hour, So yeah, that was one of my projects there. We had lived on the lake as well. Okay, so we got one more spot here to straighten out.
You also made a horse-drawn sleigh too, right?
I made a sleigh too, yeah. Getting close. Yeah, looks better. Okay, compare it here. Check with my template. Okay, let that cool down a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put my, start to take the corners down a little bit. Not coming down to any finished dimensions on that yet. But we're reeling in. How are we doing on time?
51 minutes right now.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and plane a little bit of this.
So when you're taking down those corners, you're just trying to make it octagonal, right?
Right now, I'm sort of making it octagonal. I'm not taking these down to anywhere near their finished size. I'm just removing bulk that I know is going to go away.
Building or restoration projects that you've helped work on lately? Like the faucet and...
Oh yeah, one of my neighbors actually works for the Ohio Historical Society, and one of their projects was they're restoring Warren G. Harding's house down in Marion, Ohio, and I helped them restore the faucets that were in the house that have been removed in the 50s or 60s and put in the attic, and they wanted to put them back, trying to make the house look like it did in 1920. If you remember your history at all, Warren G. Harding was famous for, when he ran for president, he just made speeches right off of his front porch and didn't travel around the country very much to campaign. So this house is, I guess, pretty important for that reason. You can look up on my Instagram and see the work that I did on that.
What's
Okay,
your
so
Instagram?
it's
At
just
Rodney
at
D.
Rodney,
Moore?
at Rodney D. Moore, yep. Okay, Croc, what's next?
Crocodile.
He's hiding.
Come here.
All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and knock down the top corner facets. And I know I'm taking very fine cuts here, but last thing I want to do is have any bad tear outs at this point. Would be pretty devastating. So super careful. This wood is much straighter than a lot that I work on. Again, not taking this down anywhere near finished, just getting the corners down. I'm just reducing some of the bulk here.
Why is it important to bring it down to octagonal before you start doing your final?
So if you leave parts of it, you know, fairly square and other parts are octagonal, and you start to bend it, trying to get it to, you know, to see how it's going to bend. Well, obviously the area that's square is going to be stiffer than an area that's mostly octagonal. So you want to try to get everything sort of down to, you know, fairly similar state from one end to the other, I guess is the way to say it. Okay, I think that's good enough for now. We'll go ahead and break now for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So see you back at 2:30. All right.